saving ladies in need, solving crimes, the power of their forces, and beautiful women. He came here from Earth from the peaceful 21st century. His life was no different from the ordinary life of an ordinary person, and was always ordinary and boring. At least until this day. This world is similar to Earth. Longtime residents call it the Blue Planet. 100 years ago, a meteorite fell on the planet, which led it to a catastrophe that engulfed the whole world. Creatures in this world began to mutate, and then attack people and humanity in general. But in some of the people, the thirst for life and the abilities with which they opposed the mutated creatures were awakened. At the last stages of human changes, the original orders and customs, such as the entertainment industry, shopping, media, karaoke, to which people are accustomed, have undergone a strong change. More precisely, they no longer existed in this world. Instead, new customs came, which led the society to divide into castes, which consisted of strong and weak people, where the winner becomes king. His name was Gao Miao. He moved here from an extremely peaceful land of the 21st century. The memory of the original owner of his body. I've already been to him. As soon as he arrived in this world and opened his eyes, he immediately saw the bodies of his comrades lying nearby, who were seriously injured after a major fight with local monsters. It hurt him. The original owner is the user of an ability that grows every day and strengthens his body in all directions, regardless of age. The original owner of Gao Miao is an orphan who was adopted by an old mercenary as a child. Growing up, he joined a small group of mercenaries, which consisted only of old masters. He was the strongest of them. That's why he's still alive, and his associates are dead. Gao Miao was truly sorry that the original owner's associates had encountered the top predators in the Doomsday world. When he was sitting at the scene and collecting his consciousness piece by piece, a mutant named Tyrannosaurus Mutant attacked him from under a huge stone. He was of the 3rd energy level. Gao Miao thought to himself that this situation would actually be fatal for him. He didn't know what his abilities were, and the way they work. Having determined his age by them, he assumed that this addition seemed to be 20 years of his stay on this earth. Otherwise, it would be impossible that he knocked down the mutant monster with one hand of his exhausted body. Then he buried his comrades in the traditions of this world. Then he went to the city, where he noticed a very strange thing. His current body looks exactly the same as the past. Even his name remained the same as in the past. But according to the memories of the original owner of his body, he looked very different. And his name wasn't Gao Miao either, but Owen. It was also strange that people who knew the previous owner called him Gao Miao, and did not seem to understand at all that he was a different person. He feels puzzled, but he cannot find an answer to such an unusual phenomenon. Therefore, he has no choice but to get used to his fate and survive in this world. 2 years later, Gao Miao sits on the roof of a broken house in the city of Dawn and falls into his thoughts. He thinks he's lucky that his body is getting stronger every day. However, it will be bad if other desires also become stronger. But suddenly he heard a vague female panting and thought that the adult film studio of the City of Dawn had returned. He immediately wanted to see what was going on there, but he didn't expect to see it. Young guys bullied a girl who was a member of the Corps of Rangers and Mercenaries. There were 2 guys. One of them, who looked old, had tentacles instead of hands. He started strangling the girl with them. And the other guy standing next to me was laughing with the pathetic look of an almost crying young lady. The girl tried to object, saying that the leader of their group would not leave those alone after such an outburst over the members of his corps. But they did not hear her, proclaiming that they were not afraid of her leader. Gao Miao, who was watching this on the roof of a tall building, threw a fiery spear at the guys while standing on the tower. Then he went down and found himself next to the girl. With a malicious smile, he told her that he had overdone the blow a little and that now they were dead. He proclaims that it is not a pity for such, and that now she is safe. He approaches the girl and says that she looks a little weak and offers her his help. She pulls her hand to him and then thanks him. Then Gao Miao senses something. He says that the strength of her body, although enhanced by the ability, it is still limited. Or in other words, it's too weak. To which she is surprised to say that she is at least a user with the ability of the 1st energy level. Then Gao Miao gives her an iron ball with the size of a palm. Then he says that if she crushes the ball, then he admits that she has qualifications. She immediately tries to crush the ball, but suddenly asks what her qualifications are if she breaks the ball. Gao Miao, without a single embarrassment and with a completely serious face, says that if she can break the ball, she will be able to make love to him. He justifies this by saying that his body is very strong, and that if the strength of the female body is not enough, her internal organs are fucked. The girl is both embarrassed and furious. It is clearly described on her face. She tells him that he doesn't have a drop of shame and uses her powers and lets air blades fly at him. After that, the guy goes away from the girl to a crowded place. Leaving, he thinks that the girl behaved very strangely. Since when he saved the girl, he felt her pheromones. He assumed that they were clearly directed at him, or rather to sleep with him. He says he doesn't understand women at all and is about to leave immediately when someone calls out to him. And not by name. His name is the King of the Wild. These turn out to be employees of a certain Manhwa, who is the Lord of the City of Dawn. They inform him that he is calling him as a guest to his mansion. At the same time, a virtual world portal opens in an unknown city from where 4 strangers and a large blue dragon come out. The only member of a group of strangers tells her friend Nelson that you can't be so greedy. Even though the rewards for achieving the goal are great, at least to get them, you need to stay alive. Nelson agrees with the woman, but in his answer also decides to be a little more pointed. He asks her why they were almost destroyed in the world of the Light Dynasty. Because someone angered the emperor by sacrificing in the form of a citizen just to get a sacrificial magic tool. The woman is angry. She answers if he wants to quarrel with her and begins to recall his other joints. She asks him if he failed several army captains just to get the Sage Stone. Nelson also proclaims that he did not even say directly who did it. After that, a man in a black cape, who looks like their commander-in-chief, tells both of them to stop the quarrel. Instead, he suggests focusing on information about the next world they will enter the day before. The man in black asks the 4th member of an unknown group, whose name is Tom, what he knows about the world they are going to get into. Tom proclaims that so far he only knows that they got into the world from the Survivors movie series. The film is a standard action blockbuster about the end of the world. In the first 3 parts of the film, the protagonist Jan Chufan rises from Waiwei and goes on a quest in search of a chip for water purification. He crosses a desert where mutant beasts are rampant, meets 4 companions, and finally encounters the villain of the world, Manhwa. Manhwa eventually dies in a heavy battle where he sacrificed all his companions. Next, Tom asks the Blue Dragon, who turns out to be their guide in this world, which part of the film the team got into this time. The guide clarifies with the system that they got into the 4th part of the film. Nelson is taken aback by this, since the villain who moved the plot, more precisely Manhwa, has already died in the 3rd part. Tom answers him that technically, judging by the chronology of the film, he is certainly the 4th in a row. However, the film turns out to be a prequel to the 3 and first parts of the film. It tells about the appearances of the supervillain Manhwa. Next, the man in black asks the guide about the assignment they were given. The guide shows a table with a task in which it is written that they must kill the villain Manhwa. The system also asks you to pay attention to the fact that the villain has the ability to absorb energies, and that with this ability he easily absorbs the energy of other people in order to increase his own. The reward for completing the task is supposed to be large. After completing this mission, each participant will be awarded 1,000 points, and the one who kills Manhwa will get a level reward. The participants are surprised by such a generous reward, and Tom says that the evaluation of their team in the Temple of God is too great. The man in black proclaims that the last time he received a level award, the members of his entire previous team died, and he managed to escape. Nelson says that he did not know about such awards at all and immediately shares plans that if he receives it, he will be able to redeem the title Alchemy of Truth. Tom touches his forehead with his hand and squints his face. He proclaims that when the level award is given so easily, it means that the task itself is very difficult. According to the previous team, the highest power of the world itself that attacked this world is 3 energy levels. Thus, the supreme boss Manhwa should be the 4th. Tom further suggests that if this is a prequel, then Manhwa has just entered the 3rd energy level and consequently, they can easily overthrow him. Manhwa reaches the peak of the 3rd energy in the middle of the film, and therefore the team needs to carefully plan their every move and possibly risk something. In the film, the villain grows up to a superpowered 4th energy level. If the team meets him at the moment when he already has this superpowered 4th energy level, then their chances of winning will not be great. Now the team decides to understand which part of the film they got into, and ask the guide to remove the system and let them enter the world of the survivor. Then the team passes through the portal. They get into this world. The man in black offers the team to find a local resident, from whom they could ask about the city in more detail. Meanwhile, in the mansion of Manhwa, Gao Miao and the villain himself begin their meal, simultaneously having a conversation with each other. Manhwa begins to flatter Gao Miao, listing his own exploits to him, and repeats that he himself is not fit for such courage as he has. Manhwa and Gao Miao are having a suspiciously pleasant conversation. Gao Miao eats food regardless of the amount. This food consists entirely of canned food. Since this is the world of the apocalypse, such food is considered very valuable here. Gao Miao thinks to himself that before traveling to this world, he did not think that he would eat canned food with such greed. Manhwa offers his guest wine. Mentally, Gao Miao resists, but does not let him understand by sight. He thinks why people, even at such a time, during the apocalypse, do not abandon their boring wine culture. He genuinely doesn't understand why people like wine. At the same time, a team of craftsmen, using their magical abilities, analyzes the state of the city. Tom says that everything doesn't look quite right. According to him, the artillery tower collapsed a long time ago, and judging by the remains, it happened a month ago. Nelson, looking surprised, asks what all this will lead to and what if the tower collapsed. What should they do now? The man in black informs that in the movie the tower is indestructible. However, it completely falls apart when Manhwa fights with Zhu Yan in full force, who, like Manhwa at that time, has a 3 energy level. To put it another way, the villain has already absorbed Zhu Yang. According to the plot, Manhwa's next target is the King of the Wild, Gao Miao, and also another master named Su Jin, who was of the 3rd energy level. Then Manhwa will increase his strength and become the greatest in the world and the only owner of the 4th energy level. Next, the woman reports that she mutilated the guard and gained access to his memory. She sees that Manhwa has already invited Gao Miao to a banquet at his mansion. Nelson proclaims that they might not miss their chance to catch them off guard during a fight against each other and grab both at the same time. In addition, there is the fact that Gao Miao is also a master of the 3rd level. Tom replies that the reason why Manhwa is considered a big boss is that he disguises himself well among people. He pretends to be good to the last, so in the eyes of the people of the city he is a real authority, and it is quite easy for these gentlemen of the city to weaken their defenses against him. Tom says that in the film, Manhwa is really a bit stronger than Gao Miao. However, in order to finally weaken and then suck all the opponent's energy from him, he calls him to his mansion and gives him poisoned wine. And judging by the memories of the guard, he has been in his house for a long time. It follows from this that he may already be dead. Nelson is angry and outraged that the gods again do not allow them to pass the level with ease. To which the man in black answers him that the gods always do this and that in each task they are taught 1 lifeline, which they hold on to until the end of the mission to survive. In the mansion, Gao Miao is just about to take a sip of wine when he feels that this wine is not worth drinking, and offers it to the owner of the house. He justifies this by saying that he himself is not a connoisseur of wine, and that good wine will be lost if it is not drunk by someone who knows the sense and value in it. Manhwa immediately refuses, saying that this wine was specially for the guest. But Gao Miao insists more and more. However, the guest does not drink wine and begins to stare intently and smiles extremely falsely at the owner of the house. The latter, in turn, asks why he is looking at him so intently and says if there is something on his face. Gao Miao very wittily and cleverly replies that deception, cunning and greed are drawn on his face. Then he picks up a glass of wine and pours it right on Manhwa. However, he manages to form a shield in front of him and hide behind him. Manhwa says that he did not expect this from Gao Miao because he ate all the food and, consequently, should not have refused a sip of wine. He also says that instead of wine in the glass there was a liquid preparation cetotoxin, which in color, taste, and even smell does not differ from red wine. And if Manhwa was offered to drink it, he wouldn't even notice. He asks him how he guessed. Out loud, Gao Miao replies that it's because he's weak. But mentally he knows that his daily ability to grow relates not only to physical, but also to spiritual strength. So, when his spiritual power reaches a certain peak, he has the ability of premonition. Gao Miao had not had such premonitions for a long time, and therefore he immediately paid attention to the wine, and then considered it a threat to his life. Manhwa mockingly asks if he even knows who he is dealing with, to which Gao Miao strikes a shield that does not break the first time, though. But for the second time, Manhwa is already flying from Gao Miao's hot fist to the corner of his house. He mockingly praises him, but still insists that he still does not have enough strength to overcome him, because his ability is to absorb damage inflicted for his own damage. Getting up and with full confidence that he will not defeat Yo, he sees a big bloody hole in his stomach, after which he is clearly really scared. He begins to persuade Gao Miao to stop and discuss everything with him. However, he is already flying towards him with a ready burning fist. When he falls from a crushing blow, his last thought becomes the abilities of the 4th energy level of Gao Miao. Manhwa lies stunned in the corner of the huge crack of the mansion that Gao Miao made with his blow. He is beaten to death by Gao Miao, and then he is crushed by his own hands. Gao Miao already assumes that the villain's soldiers have already gathered together to crush the guest. But he is surprised to see that all his subordinates are already kneeling in front of him. One of their soldiers begins to say that their lord overestimated his abilities and did not even properly prepare for the battle with the guest, after which he was overthrown. He proclaims that from now on their new lord is Gao Miao. Mentally, the soldier understands that Gao Miao's strength is far beyond human comprehension. Gao Miao says that, to be honest, he doesn't want to be the lord of the city who commands right and left. After that, he agrees to become the lord. Cities, however, only for a few days. The soldier proclaims that his employees will help and support him to the best of their abilities. He says that they will also make sure that everything goes smoothly and well when he is a lord. And then suddenly an idea comes to Gao Miao's head, and he broadcasts his first order to his employees. Due to the reputation of a good ruler of the city, Manhwa's death will not be announced to the public immediately. Instead, his soldiers will pretend that nothing happened. And since he has reached the 4th energy level, he no longer wants to care about something else less than him. Instead, he gives his duties to someone else, or rather Tao Miao. As soon as Gao Miao became the city lord, his first order was to gather all the beauties of the city under any pretext in the City of Dawn, and then hold a contest of female abilities. However, the problem was to collect only beauties, but still a few girls were invited, just to get the expected number. Of course, the environment of this world is such that there are not so many beautiful women in this world. Gao Miao is already getting discouraged, because all the women who came to the contest are either beautiful and weak or not beautiful enough, but strong. He does not find the option of a girl where both options are combined together and thinks, has there really been no girl who can achieve his goals with him? The commander-in-chief of the soldiers announces to Gao Miao that when they were considering the applications of the contestants, they may have found a suitable option for their current lord. Gao Miao asks that this contestant be called to the stage, but the order was such that this girl was almost at the bottom of the queue. However, the judges announce that the lord has changed the list and asks the contestant to come out under the number 999. A woman in a black cape enters the stage. Gao Miao asks the soldier's general why she covered her face. In response, he asks him to be a little more patient. The woman opens her cape and immediately shows the lord interesting scenes with women right on the stage, and proclaims that her powers are an illusion of the mind. It turns out to be a woman named Xiao Fu from the team that recently arrived in this world for Missy to crush Manhwa. Lord begins to evaluate her body, attractiveness, and abilities. He says that her level is not high, pulls the maximum to the 2nd level, but since she has really rare abilities, he suddenly has an idea. He asks the girl if she is strong enough to create an illusion like a dream for someone. The girl enthusiastically replies that she is quite capable of doing this. Mentally, she thinks why Gao Miao stayed alive after he went to Manhwa's house. In a good mood, Gao Miao orders the general of soldiers to bring her to his room and says that he chooses her. The presenter asks the girl to stay late because the lord wants to talk to the girl in his room alone. She is escorted to the lord's bedroom and immediately leaves. This, however, makes a woman think, but she thinks it's good for her anyway. The lord begins to get acquainted with the woman and just begins to say his name, as she immediately flies to him to hug. She tells him that she can do anything for him that he only tells her. He asks her if she really wants to skip all the steps to a relationship so quickly. He asks her if it's because of his male pheromones. He also says that he likes her, but not because of her body or appearance, but only because of her abilities. He also tells her that she has a weak body. He praises her abilities, saying that they are truly unique and they can help him achieve the practice of climbing. The woman asks what kind of climbing he means and why he called Xiao Fu. She mentally thinks that Gao Miao is planning this. He repeats to her once again that he only needs her abilities. He asks her to make him a wonderful dream in which there will be a lot of food and drinks. But the most important thing is an unlimited number of beauties. About myself, Gao Miao thinks he hasn't had a dream since he came to this world, and that at least this one will help him relax a little. He thinks that her abilities are not enough for his sleep, but still wants to try and see what she will do. She tells him that it is difficult to create an accurate and individual world, and this will require careful and help from the Lord. She thinks that he doesn't even want to touch a real person, and assumes that he just wants entertainment and relaxation. However, she wants to take advantage of this opportunity while Gao Miao is around. The Lord sits on the bed and waits for distant instructions from the woman. The woman climbs onto the bed and covers the Lord's eyes with a white cloth. She asks him to relax and free his mind. She climbs on top of him and tells him to forget everything he knows about reality until he feels every inch of her body. She gets up behind him and hugs him. After that, he asks to relax again so that Xiao Fu can stay close to him. She asks if he can feel her, then blows into his ear. He assumes that in this way she seduces him. He says that the main thing is the quality of his sleep, and even if she teases him, there will be no extra points for it. The woman answers him that this is a necessary part of preparation in order to create the reality of a dream. She proclaims that after sleeping he will be very well. The woman says she is starting preparations. Suddenly, a spider claw begins to appear from behind Xiao Fu, and she herself then turns into a half spider and half human. Gao Miao feels a wet sliding sensation. He thinks, is she really going to play with him? The woman tells him not to open his eyes, and after that, she creates a web around the Lord on her own, which ties him tightly. It forms a cocoon in which he will sit. But suddenly the cocoon of cobwebs breaks after Gao Miao moved his hands and the woman gets angry. So far, Gao Miao doesn't suspect anything. He thinks it's cool. However, he can't just sit and not move. He wants to pretend to be dead, but he thinks it's too late for that. She tries to make a cocoon out of her web again. He is silent. From this, she assumes that her plan has worked and creates hypnosis to subdue him. His body listens and obeys what she says, but his mind remains switched on. She thinks that her little adventure was worth it, and that now her team has a chance to defeat Pan Y. Gao Miao begins to suspect that he is being attacked, and thinks that this is a kind of power to manipulate people. In the hope that her trick worked, the woman begins to open her eyes to the Lord. She tells him that, despite the fact that he plays in the film, he is a very good actor, and that now it will be easy for them to kill the boss with his help. Mentally, he is angry that there will always be those people who want to harm him. Such an attack on him cannot cause him to have a premonition, but he can easily turn off hypnosis. He thinks that about her words, about the character of the film. He doesn't understand what other movie she meant. He is inspired by the idea that he is really in the movie. She calls him after her, calling him cute, while he is reasoning that he can destroy this control at any moment. But first he wants to know what she wants to do with him, and obeys her orders. Thus, he finds himself in the conscious control of this strange woman, and they leave the city. Outside the city, they find themselves in a village of tramps. She brings him to the headquarters of her team and asks her comrades to look at him. Who she brought here? Nelson looks at her questioningly, saying that it's just a blonde guy. He says that he did not expect that she would find such a person in this world, and advises her to sell him for a lot as a slave. Tom explains that Sister Xiao Fu brought not just a blonde guy, but Master Gao Miao to investigate their mission and quickly defeat Pan Y. She tells him that Tom is still smart because he is absolutely right. She proclaims that she brought him here under her control, that he is still under the illusion of her control. The man in black asks Tom if there are any changes in the plot, since the film does not say that Pan Y gives his power as a lord to someone else. In the middle and end of the film, all of Pan Y's tricks at the level of the King of the Desert devour his own food for his advancement to the 4th level. Tom replies that this is not surprising. Afterwards, he says that it is not surprising that Gao Miao is still alive. He proclaims that Gao Miao in the film is a very short character in the film, who is shown for a short time, after which he dies at the hands of Pan Y. However, there are countless reincarnations in the world of cinema, and often after each reincarnation, the plot remains the same. In the general direction, the EO differs in details. Only the reincarnation of the main character, that is, Pan Y, is particularly different. But the reincarnations of minor characters are not particularly affected by the plot as such. Gao Miao already believes in his head that he is in the movie and cannot believe his ears. He wonders if the one he beat to death is the main hero of this world. Further, he believes that this is not the case, but that he is just a minor character in the film who dies at the hands of the main character. Tom tells Xiao Fu that he is another 3rd level peak master. This is a significant gain for their common war effort. Nelson says it was easy to do. He also proclaims that it was too easy for Xiao Fu to control Gao Miao, and plus nothing about me in the movie itself. But Xiao Fu tells him that it wasn't so easy, because she almost failed. Tom pours into the conversation, saying that this case often means that Pan Y is stronger than they assume. Even if Pan Y is not at the 4th energy level, he is still at the peak of the 3rd level, and is still considered invincible. Tom proclaims that in the end, the Temple of the Void of Heaven did not send them to this world for rest. And he also says that they should all understand what such a high reward for achieving this mission means. Meanwhile, Gao Miao begins to wonder why they are all talking about Manhwa. If he's that weak, then he realizes that these 4 people are also travelers and that they seem to have used the power of the Heavenly Void Palace to get here. He begins to guess what kind of organization it is called the Heavenly Palace of Emptiness. At first he thinks it's a sect or something else, then plunges into another. Doom. Tom smilingly says that, however, you should not worry too much about Missy, and that he is not going to attack head-on. Tom tells Xiao Fu to lock up Gao Miao first so that he can get the necessary information from him. Xiao Fu orders Gao Miao to go to another room and behave himself. Suddenly Gao Miao thinks something is wrong, because he is so hypnotized. Why are they sending him alone to a dark room? Gao Miao is already falling apart in order to leave, but as soon as he does, the team immediately attacks him. He thinks how he was so quickly understood and first tells himself that it is tedious to remove at least one of them. He is hit by a huge stone fist, after which he falls to the ground. But this blow does not bring him any injuries and he immediately gets up. Now he has an alarm, which means that he is in danger. In the next second, huge firearms and a lot of balls of fire are flying at him. He is thrown up by the same huge hand that hit him last time. The hand belongs to a huge stone monster, in whose shoulders there is a team. Nelson asks why Tom suddenly gave them the signal to attack Gao Miao so suddenly with all their strength, which they were preparing for Manhwa. He also asks why he used his psychological attacks, which were also intended for Manhwa. Tom replies that he can monitor the state of biological activity of brainwaves. During their conversation, Gao Miao's active brainwaves were very intense. It meant what he was thinking, what they were talking about. He also mentions that the creatures that Xiao Fu hypnotizes are not in a state of thinking at all when they are under control. In other words, Xiao Fu was deceived, and Gao Miao disguised himself. When Tom noticed that Tao Miao was giving in, he did everything necessary to catch him off guard. A man in black, already wearing a red iron suit, and tells them to consider it practical work before crushing Manhwa. Xiao Fu, also wearing a blue iron suit, is outraged that her dandelion is some kind of minor character. In a rage, she says that she will finish him off after this despicable act. After that, she calls out to the team to crush him in the most painful way. After the ash fog from the bullets descends, the team sees that Gao Miao is still alive and hurt. Moreover, he managed to transform into his strongest form. His blonde and very short hair suddenly becomes too long. He glares at the team and says that the god of all animals, the progenitor of all mutant animals, saw him last in this form, over whom Gao Miao eventually won and then scattered his ashes. You can't get mad at his strength. And he shouts that he can't be that strong because he's just a mediocre character who is killed by the main character, not the main boss of the movie. Xiao Fu asks what is defined. There is a limit to how much the plot can change. She says that this is not the Gao Miao they met according to the system. He definitely doesn't have a third energy level. She asks if he was that strong. Tom begins to assume that the god and progenitor of beasts, whom Gao Miao mentioned in his conversation, must be more powerful than Manhwa in his strongest years. But this character is not mentioned in the film. And if Gao Miao really killed him, then he is probably the strongest character in this world. Their leader asks them not to run ahead of the train and says that they do not yet know about the powers of this guy. He says that they must crush him at any cost and therefore starts the attack first. Nelson throws a magic stone into his mouth, which he previously held in his hands. After that, he turns into a huge stone monster and begins to threaten the guy that he will destroy him. Gao Miao replies to him with a mocking tone that he is allowed to play with him a little, since he is already considered the most invincible on this planet. Nelson and their captain, united, begin to attack Gao Miao. All of their blows turn out to be noticeably strong for their fight, and for Gao Miao, however, not to the extent to kill him. He exclaims that he can finally show all his strength without holding it back. Gao Miao takes off from the ground and also launches an attack. He warns them to be careful, as he is really switching to full power. He punches their captain in the face without making much effort, but he already loses consciousness. A huge stone block comes to his aid and also begins to attack. Gao Miao notices that he uses the force of gravity to make his punch stronger, and then she rushes to him with her fists. He hits the limbs of the stone monster, and they scatter on the ground like petals. Tom is the next to attack. He reads 33,000 forbidden words of a forbidden spell. This spell summons the tentacles of the ancient god of the blood pool. Even when he's just casting a spell, all the juices are pouring out of his eyes. And after that, huge red tentacles, similar to the tentacles of an octopus, come out of the scarlet sky. All tentacles are directed at Gao Miao. He says that they look very appetizing, but they don't taste like an octopus at all. He begins to tear these tentacles and throws them into the bright red sky, which in turn pierces him. Then he goes to Xiao Fu. She summons the skeleton soul and asks to borrow the power of the great skeleton king. After that, a huge transparent blue creature similar to a gorilla appears and starts attacking Gao Miao. He picks up a huge piece of earth and throws it at the spirit. She flies into the hand of the spirit, after which she pierces it, and Xiao Fu receives very large damage to his body. She shouts that he is very strong and says that he has definitely already reached the 4th energy level. Their captain orders the use of 4 gods to kill, or they themselves will die at the hands of Gao Miao. They pick up figurines similar to the silhouette of animals. Each animal is different, and these figurines are very similar to the key. With the sharp side, they pierce their breasts with them, after which they talk about the associations of each of them with their gods. Xiao Fu has a red firebird, the captain has a green dragon, Nelson has a blue turtle, and Tom has a golden tiger. The 4 gods unite and begin the attack not in turn, but immediately in the 4th. They combine into a huge circle, which forms huge cargo clouds, as well as waves that fly to the ground. The earth begins to crack under the pressure of the multicolored fireworks. But Gao Miao himself doesn't look like a man in trouble. They are flying towards Gao Miao right in this guise. You can't even tell from his face that he's upset. On the contrary, he is glad that he can demonstrate his real powers without holding them back. He flies into the sky, where their circle stands, and makes the most crushing blow that he is capable of. And he is clearly capable of no more. 4 comrades fly to the ground completely beaten and stricken, with their faces mutilated from despair. After that, everyone plops down on the ground in a rather unnatural position. Gao Miao turns around to look at their condition and says that he has not had such a high quality and comprehensive fight for a long time after defeating the god and the progenitor of beasts. He goes on to say, if they admit defeat, he can spare and let them go. He is surprised to notice that his rivals are all dead. They are lying on the ground in a pretty terrible body condition. That makes this scene look creepy. He proclaims that in fact, having released his full form, he has completely lost control of himself, and that his strength has increased countless times. He says he should have learned to control his ardor more. After that, he returns to his former appearance of medium strength. Gao Miao was hungry since he had used up his last strength in his full form. He needed to satisfy his hunger, and he began to leave. He says that, judging by their conversation, this organization must be very strong and influential, since it could send these people to another world. He regrets that he could not leave at least one alive in order to ask them about the heavenly palace of emptiness. Then he is about to leave, when he hears the voice of the blue dragon, or rather the guide of the previous stricken team. The guide says that the team was destroyed. Then he broadcasts that a certain guide 10,068 completes his mission and is ready to return to the heavenly palace of emptiness. After that, the disconnection procedure begins. Gao Miao sees a blue dragon in front of him in a system in which there is a reverse report of numbers. The system starts a reverse report from 10 to 6 and someone interrupts this process. An error occurs in the system, so it cannot finish its process. The system is pierced, and a small pink winged dragon with a red bow on its neck flies out of it. The dragon is upset that her entire team was killed when she was carrying out her current mission. She says that if at least someone was left alive, she immediately created a new group. After that, she proclaims that if the entire mission team is destroyed, the guide will be disconnected from the connection with the Temple of the Emptiness of Heaven. And after the review of the births of the self-consciousness of the guide will necessarily be revealed. The dragon's name is Nui, and she was the guide of this team. She says with horror that she has only interrupted the process of separation, and that the Temple of the Emptiness of Heaven will soon be reunited. They don't know what to do, because if the temple connects with her, she will die, just like her team. Gao Miao, who is watching her, approaches her and asks if she can ask her a question, to which she shrugs him off, not noticing a living person in front of her. But she is surprised not only by a living person, but also by the fact that a person from the film sees her in a way that is not typical of movie characters. Gao Miao replies to her that on the contrary, it is difficult for him not to notice her since she is very conspicuous. He rudely tells her who she calls the character, and starts waving his hand in the hope of catching the dragon. Nui's mood immediately rises, after which she says that it is impossible to catch the temple guides and even touch them. since those, in turn, are only informational beings, not physical. But suddenly the dragon is grabbed by the bow around her neck, and Gao Miao looks at her shocked face with a malicious smile. The dragon is trying to escape from the clutches of a man and does not understand how this could have happened at all. Meanwhile, Gao Miao begins to ask her about who these people are and what their relationship is. What kind of organization called the Temple of the Emptiness of Heaven? Is it really all just a movie? And how she came to this world. Finally, he asks her if he can leave this world. She replies that she will not tell him anything, to which he threatens her with the fact that he can kill her. Nui answers him that he is a traveler and suggests that he came from the main world. And then she realizes why he can see her, hear her, and even touch her. And all this is because he is not a local resident. He doesn't understand what she's saying. And again he asks what she means. She unfolds her answer and says that anything he wants to know, she can tell her. However, soon the Temple of Emptiness will contact her, and therefore she offers him to take her to leave this world. She asks to believe her, because when the link of the Temple of Emptiness comes, the mission team will definitely pay attention to him as a native of the Kingdom of Emptiness who reunited the mission team. She warns him that the Temple of the Void of Heaven is aimed at destroying everyone that they are. She tells him not to even think about underestimating the Heavenly Void Hall, only because he was able to finish off the Iron Omen team. Nui also proclaims to him not to be arrogant in his powers, because he is only at the 4th level of strength, and that he can only dominate in this world. His secret will be impossible to hide. And so Nui offers him a deal. He also grabs her by the bow and says that he has heard about the levels, and asks her a sarcastic question whether he will go with her after that. He thinks to himself that a great crisis in history is coming soon and wonders whether to believe this dragon. After a little thought, he gives her a positive answer, but on the condition that she will tell him everything he wants to know, and tells her that he will take her to another world with him. But suddenly he remembers that he cannot leave the world for some specific reason that he does not know himself, and tells the dragon about it. Nui assures him that, of course, he cannot do it himself, but with her help they will still be able to leave this world together. He gravely asks her to tell him how it will work. She begins to explain that Nui will be deprived of all the power of the Heavenly Void Hall. Otherwise she will be found wherever she runs. However, after the deprivation of these abilities, Nui's consciousness will remain only for a second, and perhaps less. She tells him to get the brand of Nui consciousness within 1 second. He asks her how he can get the brand of her consciousness. She says that after she is deprived of her strength, Nui will throw herself at Gao Miao with all her might in order to merge into the soul of the guy. She explains to her that it is harmless and equivalent to connecting to his soul, which will not affect him in any way. With tears in her eyes, she asks not to open up from the stigma of Nui's consciousness and asks for a connection so that she does not die completely, to which Gao Miao agrees without any problems and asks her to enter his soul. Mentally, he thinks that if he feels danger, he can hide as far away as possible. Nui feels that this person is unreliable and that the stigma of the girl's consciousness will not last in his soul. But she decides to try anyway, since she has no other choice anyway. So she reads her spell. The system starts correcting the connection error. Nui enters Gao Miao's soul and body. In the process, he thinks that there was no danger from her and that he did not feel alarm from the dragon. After that, he feels an amazing feeling that something is attached to his soul. Nui comes out of Gao Miao's body in the form of a spirit and rejoices that she is alive. Now she calls him her master and anxiously tells him that they should run away from here as soon as possible. She says that since he destroyed the team that went through the mission, the Temple of the Void will eventually conduct a deep investigation, where it will recognize him, and before this is not disclosed, they have to run. Gao Miao asks how and where they will go. Nui says that Gao Miao is able to travel from the main world to the imaginary world, since he has the ability to travel, but he cannot use it on his own. Nui can also help him in using this ability. He asks Nui to do it quickly, since it feels like the people from the Temple of the Emptiness of Heaven are already close. Gao Miao feels the weight of the fact that the crisis is about to come. She immediately accepts her master's order. But first, Gao Miao asks her to wait a little while until he picks up one thing from the team that he crushed. Thus, he wants to leave a memory of their common and very good fight. Nui immediately stops him, saying that all the things of this team belong to the Temple of the Emptiness of Heaven, which has the brand of the Temple of the Emptiness of Heaven. She says that if he takes at least one thing with him, their escape will not be secret, and they will be found immediately. Gao Miao is immediately upset by this news, but still asks them to get out of here as soon as possible. Nui begins to activate Gao Miao's ability to travel. He also feels that his ability has turned on at this moment, She asks him if he is ready, to which Gao Miao immediately replies in the affirmative. She then asks him not to be too surprised. Nui proclaims that she forgot to mention that her ability does not allow them to choose the world they will enter themselves, and that this world comes to them randomly. He tells her that it doesn't matter at all. However, Nui informs him that his ability is very unique, and it is very rare, and that while Gao Miao is hiding it, no one is able to find them. Nui then says that she will tell him everything when they arrive in the new world. So, they get into a room with a system installed on it that controls Gao Miao's power. Gao is surprised and asks Nui where they got to. He also mentions that they were supposed to get to the new world at the address, but for some reason they came to some room unseen by God. The whole time Gao says this, he pulls Nui towards him, holding and pinching her cheek. She answers that soon all the information about the new world will be provided to them by the system, which is located in the same room. An inscription gradually appears on the wall. The inscription highlights the name of the world they will enter, and his brief introduction. And the world is called the Dead Witch. In the brief introduction of this world, it is written that the three of them defeated the Tree Demon and the Demon King of the Mountain, who wanted to marry Nizai Okian, which eventually led to the fact that the dead or ghosts in love became a real family. Gao Miao asks in surprise if it's a movie, but Nui says it's a brief introduction to the world they're about to enter. He reads the inscription for the second time and recognizes the movie he has watched for a long time. He says that this movie was created based on the Liaozhi dynasty, and also that the beautiful woman Nizai Okian has a demon soul. He again asks with surprise, is she really going to get into the world of cinema again? Nui replies that this is not a movie, but a world that is, in turn, an imaginary world. She continues that the main world is also called the real world, and its opposite in chaos is the imaginary world. It goes on to say that many literary and artistic works in the mainstream world, including films, are in the worlds. All this was born out of the inspiration of an imaginary world, who influenced people. From this, Gao Miao draws a conclusion and wonders if this means that the Earth belongs to the side of the main world. He asks Nui what she can do if he wants to go back to Earth. In response, she asks if he came from there, and again reminds him of his ability to travel through random worlds. She says that they will find out at the very last moment where they will end up, and that perhaps, if they are very lucky, it will be Earth. But it's also possible that even after 100 attempts, they won't get there. He is shocked that through the possible worlds they will fall into, they will have to wait in ignorance for so long to finally get to Earth. Nui informs him that if he wants to go back, he will have to work hard to increase his life expectancy and earn virtual resources, the so-called system currency. She goes on to say that in the end, every time he activates travel abilities, he needs to consume virtual resources. This time, Nui spent a virtual resource to help her master move from a movie to another movie. To begin with, Gao wonders what a virtual resource is. Nui replies that a virtual resource is a unique energy of the virtual world and that it can only be used in a virtual celestial hall. But Nui, being a being of the Void Heaven Palace, also possesses this ability. She says that when he enters the world, the demon kin Nui will also help his master. After so many years in the Hall of the Void of Heaven, Nui used 2 resources, and that now only the last one remains. This time, Gao Miao understands everything, and now he wants to quickly earn virtual resources and return back to Earth. He tells Nui to get to the process faster, when suddenly he notices his reflection in the mirror opposite him. He looked the same as in his previous life on Earth. Gao is surprised to say that he forgot what he looked like in his real form, in which he was on Earth. He asks Nui why he is the same again as he was before the transition to another world. She tells him that he looks like this because his ability to move to other worlds is not just a journey, but rather a very rare phenomenon. As soon as the force is activated, he enters a random world. And if he replaces this or that character in this movie, the power of the original will be preserved. And as for the rest, more precisely, the body and the soul, they will be replaced by a form. Gao Miao. This replacement will allow the whole world to recognize that his character's name is Gao Miao. She says that even travelers such as the group Iron Omens, which died at Missy, enter the world with a distorted perception. Nui informs him that he is traveling to a new world to take the place of the character, and the character himself, who has been replaced, is compressed into a card and stored in a typo of Gao Miao's existence. As a rule, it cannot be reused, but Nui as an informational life form can make it so that he can use it again. Thus, a character from the previous world is transformed into his virtual account. The owner can replace him again with this character. With one thought, he is shown his first character and his brief profile. In the virtual world, Nui tells Gao that he can also set a transformation spell and then quickly change any character. At the same time, every time Gao Miao moves to another role, he will not directly replace the appearance of the character, to which he imagines himself in the role of Sailor Moon, into whose body he got from this spell. He refuses the spell, saying that such things don't matter. He then tells Nui to hurry into the world of sinister souls to earn a virtual resource. Nui opens a portal and informs Gao about it. They walk through one room, after which Gao asks where this place is. Nui replies that this is the Void Room, which she secretly created with the help of a virtual resource when she worked in the Void Hall of Heaven, and that it has the ability to penetrate into the world and can only remain on its surface. She says that it is rather a place where you can stop for a while and recuperate. He asks why this room is so pink. He thinks it looks too ugly. She also tells him that this room can change its shape and style as Gao Miao himself wishes. He says that next time he will make a large harem with hundreds of rooms, each of which will have a bed. Then he asks her why this room is called the Room of Emptiness and suggests a new name, Gao Miao's harem. She replies that this name is long and in response offers her own version, which is called Crystal Palace. Gao again asks the question of why everything is pink and why Nui's aesthetics are so strange. And then it dawns on him that it's a female dragon. Meanwhile, in this world, an old witch takes Nai Ziokian hostage and tortures her with thorny plants that cover her from all sides. The girl tells the witch to kill her because she will not obey the witch if she is left alive. And at this moment, the portal opens from behind the witch, and her ivy tightens it, after which Gao transforms into the role of a witch. Of course, he does not become the witch herself, as previously stated, he only takes her form in a male form. More precisely, he becomes the master of all trees, and can also manage them. He looks with surprise at the young lady kneeling opposite and mentally thinks why he is a druid witch. When he doesn't even have time to open his mouth, she says he's an old monster. The guy is perplexed and the girl is kneeling in front of him quite damaged and looks at him waiting for an answer with eyes completely absorbed in rage. All this takes place on the palace, which stands at the largest point of a huge tree, and it is called the Palace on the Tree. It turns out that Gao is reincarnated not in the guise of a witch of trees, but in the guise of a sorceress of dryads. He and Nui begin to discuss his reincarnation. He feels much weaker in this body and does not feel the boundless strength that he had in the past world. Nui gives him a mirror and says that his existing branch can only be registered in one account at a time. And since the Dryad's energy is only at the early stage of the third energy level, which is much less than that of his previous character, he feels so weak. He says that this old dryad has been practicing her power for 600 years, but still only at the third energy level, and reports that this causes him some uncertainty. He asks why they have to open a new account every time, if you can just change it to an existing account where there is a strong character on the level. Nui categorically denies him this, since he cannot use the powers of another character from a completely different world. In this case, his data opens up to the consciousness of the heavens of this world. She says it would be easier to accept the punishment of exile than to accept the catastrophe caused by the gods from the heavenly temple, since in this case, Gao Miao might die, and that they would not be able to deceive the heavens by just using another identity, because they would find out sooner or later. Gao Miao says that he has a feeling that heaven is the immune system, and they are invading pathogens. Nui from the word does not understand at all what he said and answers him something he said sounds strange. However, she says he has every right to take it that way. He proclaims to her that, in short, in each virtual world, they should act like the previous team. Nui answers in the affirmative, and he says that it's because the Palace of Emptiness closes the heavens, and that if Nui spends the virtual source, it can also fool them for a while. However, she says that her mission is not to deceive them, but to earn some virtual resources, because she does not have them. After that, a pinched card with the questionnaire of the current character Gao Miao is displayed. There is all the information about him, including his name, abilities, rank, demonic power, and notes regarding his powers. The card says that he controls all the trees within 100 miles and can borrow up to 30 of the power of an extraordinary tree, instantly increasing the magical power of a tree monster. Notes regarding its power. His abilities as the Lord of all trees will develop following the increase in the demonic power of the Dryad. After seeing the card, Gao Miao praises Nui and pats her on the head. He thinks to himself, in the original story, the Dryad fights Yan Zio 5 times. The victory was just the luck of the main character, even if he thought he had abilities. Gao assumes that as long as he does not contact the Demon King of Black Mountain, no serious problems should arise. Nai Ziokian, who was watching all this, sees that he is talking to himself. About myself. She thinks what he plans to do to her and suggests that they will be severely punished. Suddenly he stops and looks at the girl still sitting on her lap. He only notices her and tells her to get up from the floor because it's cold there, and that she might get sick. He wants to help her up, but she waves him away. Trembling, she repeats that the old monster. She asks him not to pretend to be nice and asks him what punishment he means this time. Gao remembers that he is in the guise of a dryad wizard, and that's why the girl hates him so much. But still, he thinks to himself how lucky he is to see her, because the real ghost of the girl really looks much better than in the movie. He also sees that he is surrounded by beautiful ladies and that his reaction is not as sharp as that of his previous character. He thinks that after that, when he faces beautiful girls in battle, his combat effectiveness will not be so weakened, which will bring him benefits in battles. Then there is an unexpected turn of events. Gao Miao takes all the girls to a huge sauna and, while they eat, sits in the water opposite them. He takes there with him a small bottle of green liquid made from the purest juice extracted by the dryad from the roots of 1,000-year-old trees. He calls it the spiritual fluid of 1,000 trees and says it contains an extremely powerful life force. This juice really has an excellent healing effect on the body and soul, which is very valuable. He pours all the liquid into the water on which they are all sitting, saying that using everything to heal these women seems like a waste of resources. However, he does it anyway, because he proclaims that the wizard values these ladies very much. He says there is no other way out. In order to restore relations with these ghost women and make his task easier, he wants to use all his resources and says that he needs to sacrifice some things. Nui is also standing in the water and tells her Tom that she has heard that men are creatures of lust. She says there are a lot of beautiful women here, ghosts, not to mention that they are all naked, and he is free to ask them for anything. She asks if he is not even the slightest bit tempted. He replies that, of course, he is tempted, but says that she should remember that he is a gentleman, and if the ladies themselves do not want to, he will not force them. Nui says that he is a real man, but mentally thinks that he is a eunuch. Then he asks Nui how she swims, if she's just a messenger. Nui replies that even if she can't enjoy the things of the virtual world, she still really likes to swim. Then he takes her by the collar of the bow and says that they will use the way of the gods to find them a virtual resource, and asks about why they are still not doing anything or undertaking anything. Nui replies that he doesn't know anything about it yet either. She says that the gods will use special means to transmit the basic rules of the world and create a task that will help them get virtual resources, that Nui was just trying to use the same method. Nui's skills cannot fail them. Perhaps, to create a task, they will need to call a condition or time, and so on. But she asks him to have a little patience, and suddenly, like a magician, two ladies come up, offer him to serve them. Then Gao Miao thinks that showing kindness still has an effective effect on people. Mentally, he draws conclusions that this is better than his previous experience, and tells himself that he should stay in this world a little longer. Two girls approach the wizard and begin massaging his shoulders and arms. He thinks if the most beautiful of these women, who is called Xiaoqian, would be as grateful as these two, everything would be much better. Gao notices her sitting alone and they cross eyes. Meanwhile, in the Lanro temple, the lucky Ning Kaicheng wants to introduce his newly married woman to his righteous brother, who will help her in some business. It turns out to be a traitor to the palace of the ruler of trees and ghost women, whose name is Liu Xiaoqian. As soon as Kaicheng introduces them, the girl says that she already knows his brother. The righteous brother's name is Yan Xiao. He tells the girl that since everything she does is ordered by the dryads, and that all her committed murders are just preludes, then he, as a person who understands her, will not expel the girl from his house. Then she falls on his lap and with tears in her eyes asks him to help her. She says that besides her, there are many ghost women in the temple who are threatened by the dryad and who are held captive by the tree wizard. She also proclaims that they all hope that her husband's righteous brother will save her. He answers her that there are countless souls in the temple and that among them there are innocent people who were killed in vain. The righteous brother proclaims that he wants to avenge them all and therefore does not refuse to help the girl. The husband of the ghost woman tells him how he can be sure that this time he will win over the dryad, if each time their slaughter ended in a draw. Yan Xiao answers him that he has been improving his physical strength and abilities since childhood. He also tells his brother that right now he is at the peak of self-cultivation of his Kai power. If the dryad fights him again, he will have every chance to win by standing far away from him. However, if he lets him get close, the dryad, after reading a spell, can instantly destroy him. Therefore, during the massacre, he says that he will not let the tree wizard read at least one spell in his direction. The palace of the tree governess was built by the witch dryad on a 1,000-year-old extraordinary tree. This is an ancient tree, a long-lived xenogenic tree with extraordinary properties that can give strength in Gao Miao. He He wants to try to ask this tree about additional powers. He stands in front of the tree and touching it with his right hand, tells the Dryad's power to give him strength. The tree does not refuse, and Gao Miao says that the accumulation of additional energies in it is really a pleasant process. Nui watches in amazement as her master takes strength from a huge tree. She proclaims that his original Dryad possesses 600 years of demonic powers. After that, the mysterious power of the tree gives him another 30 additional strength, and that leaves 900 years of demonic forces. Gao Miao, Nui replies, "What if you add another 100 years? He could become the Demon King." He says he can't find anything in the Dryad's memory related to the energy level system. However, it has a different energy system. This system is in the form of a scale that indicates who will become who and after how many years this happens, as well as the movement of spirits in the cycle of life. And if you read more, then the first scale, in which the numbers are more indicated, 1-500 years is considered a small demon, 501-999 years is considered a big demon. And the final stage, when the creature turns 1000 years old, he becomes the king of demons. The next scale says that the first stage of the soul's journey is that it turns into existence. The second stage is the transformation of Kai into spirit. Also, the third and final stage is the cleansing spirit returns to emptiness. Gao Miao says that, in other words, as long as he does not get involved with several strong characters of the original film, he can do whatever his heart desires. He demonstrates his strength in front of Nui, and at the same time, the deputy checks their presence. Gao wonders what it's like to be a magician. It seems cool to him that his power at first glance is infinite. He thinks about himself how to come up with a way to improve this Dryad's power so that in the future he can use Owen for close combat, and the Dryad for fighting at distances. He also thinks that if he encounters the legendary trees, his strength, that is, the Dryad's strength, will be even greater than Owen's. After that, his female ghost subordinates come and clap him, saying that their mighty Dryad was able to unite the demon world with his power, and someone exclaims that the old monster is showing his strength again. Mentally, they all don't want to clap and indulge him. Even standing next to him is painful for them. However, he has the bone ashes of each of them, and they are forced to obey his orders. Each of them dreams of escaping from this cursed palace and ending the painfully long days they spend in this terrible place. Suddenly, in the place where they are standing, there is a heart-rending and piercing sound that scares women. Gao Miao briskly orders all of them to go into the palace and hide somewhere. They all obey his orders. Nui tells him that probably the only priest who can appear here and around this time is a Taoist priest named Yan Xiao. He remembers that the tree priest will have to fight with the main characters of this world. Meanwhile, in the palace of the tree wizard, the women gather in a circle and discuss what is happening with them. The women discuss that the character of the tree wizard has suddenly changed, and he has become softer than usual. One woman says that perhaps he has changed for the better, but others immediately mention to her that the monster gave them punishments, and say that such a tyrant cannot be forgiven. They start asking each other if the woman has succeeded. The ghost of Xiaoqian. Suddenly, one of the Xiaoqians pours into the conversation and says that a few days ago she went to the Lanru temple and found an old Taoist priest living there with deep knowledge, and then tricked him into coming to the tree wizard's palace to exorcise the demons from the Dryad mage. She says it's possible. Suddenly, the wizard realized this, and first he flogged her, and then banished them into a trap in the palace. But fortunately, she sent Lai Xiaoqian there in advance so that she would definitely bring a Taoist priest for their rescue operation. The women begin to admire that soon they will be released from captivity, and they pray for the priest to win. The woman who brought this news opens a certain eye with the shape of the portal with her abilities, and the female ghosts begin to look at the battlefield. The Taoist priest Yan Xiao informs the Dryad that he has arrived to fight with him for the second time. The Dryad enthusiastically greets him, which of course he shouldn't do. Nui warns him that in the film at this moment the priest is at the peak of cleansing Kai to the spirit stage, and that his strength is equal to that of a Dryad who used the magic power of her tree. The priest, as if in a rage, immediately attacks the Dryad. The Dryad asks him if he attacks him directly. The priest does not answer. The wizard tells him that ruthless people are taciturn, to which the priest smiles maliciously, and they start the slaughter. The priest proclaims to him that their forces are equal, and that he is not afraid of him. Mentally, Yan Xiao thinks that for some reason, instead of stepping back and reciting a spell, he fights with him from close range, from which he concludes that he is incredibly stupid. The priest takes his sword in his hands and begins to shove them at the Dryad. All the juices are pouring out of it. Gao Miao at this moment realizes that he subconsciously fought with him before using Owen's fighting methods and scolds himself for his carelessness. Fortunately, at that moment, there is a forest spirit essence in his body that can heal his wounds. He thinks that this time he has learned his lesson and will cast spells in battle at a distance from the enemy. Gao Miao immediately falls to the ground with a crushed body. The priest's brother immediately assumes that he has won, and enthusiastically says that evil, of course, since ancient times cannot surpass legitimate good. And his wife is surprised that he killed the dryad instantly. Nui at this moment, whom no one sees, rejoices, looking at their faces. And she says that the stupid characters don't even suspect how scary her master can be. Of course, they don't hear her. The women watching from the tower also begin to admire that the priest crushed the dryad. However, one of them, more precisely Ziokian, warily tells them that the fight is not over yet. She proclaims that the old monster has the essence of the spirit of the forest on his body, which can instantly heal his wounds, and that one blow from the priest clearly will not crush him. From the tower, she begins to call the priest, shouting directly into the portal, which she created so that everyone could fully observe the battle. She tells him that the dryad will not die so easily, and in order to finally finish him off, you must at least beat him until his bone ashes become a bullet, and his soul does not dissipate. Immediately hearing this, the priest agrees with the woman. After that, he begins to get a lot of swords in order to make a contract. All the swords fly to the dryad and explode right on his territory, after which a huge amount of smoke from the fire is formed. This time they all think that the fight is over and the dryad has been overthrown. She begins to rejoice at this news, thinking that from now on they are all finally free. The priest says that the demonic power of the dryad has disappeared. However, another terrible Kai appears instead. He asks how such a monster could possess such a strong Kai. Behind huge clouds of smoke, Dryad ironically begins to praise the Ziokian who betrayed him, and then tells her that he intends to crush her in return. Gao Miao changes the Dryad to Owen and takes advantage of Nui's only and last virtual resource. On the sidelines, Nui begins to root for the victory of her master, but mentally she is very sorry that her master used her last virtual resource in order to change the character.